I am Sophie, 34 years old. I once lay bleeding out on hard, dry dirt, my uniform soaked in my own blood. But I swear to you that suffocating feeling of death creeping in was nothing compared to the cruelty of standing in my own home, realizing my life and death scars were nothing but trash in my own mother's eyes. It was Mother's Day last year. In the middle of a lavish party paid for entirely by my hazard pay, she raised her crystal glass, looked me dead in the eye in front of 40 guests, and said, "I wish I had a normal daughter instead of a cold, emotionless killing machine." My chest caved in, my dignity trampled under the heel of the woman who gave birth to me. And when I quietly picked up the keys to my own car to leave, she frantically called the cops and reported me for theft. She thought the title of mother gave her the right to stomp on my absolute bottom line without consequence. She forgot a basic rule of survival. When the red line is crossed, you don't shed tears. You completely cut off the traitor's life support. Before I show you exactly how I stripped everything back from her hands, let me know where you're listening from down in the comments. Hit the like button and subscribe if you understand the choking anger of being bled dry by your own flesh and blood, only to be thrown away like worthless garbage. The final word hung in the stifling Arizona heat. Silence. 40 people. 40 designer outfits. Nobody moved. The laughter at the Bougainvillea estate died instantly. A crystal glass clinked somewhere in the back, the ice hitting the rim with a sharp, hollow ring. Wine glasses hovered midway to open mouths. Everyone just stared. These were the Scottsdale elite. Now they were just a sweaty, awkward audience. Over in the corner by the patio heater, Logan put his beer down. Hard. The heavy thump of the glass against the stone table tore right through the quiet. He didn't say a word. He just stood up straight, planting his heavy boots wide on the pavement, his jaw tight. A thick, faded scar stretched across his neck, catching the light. He didn't even look at Jackie on her makeshift stage. His eyes were locked entirely on me. Waiting. Just waiting for a nod. A signal. I didn't move an inch. My lungs seized up, tightening like a fist inside my chest, squeezing the oxygen straight out of me. But my face cold stone. I let my eyes flick over the long catered dining tables. Napa Valley red wine catching the evening light. Heavy silver platters piled high with glistening tomahawk steaks. Every single bite on those tables, every drop of expensive liquor in those glasses was paid for with my credit card just 3 days ago. I looked at the woman standing under the string lights. My mother. She didn't care about the jagged raised lines carved into my shoulder under this shirt. She didn't care about the months I spent choking down stale, rock-hard food out of foil packets in dry dirt trenches, counting every penny so I could send a paycheck home. She just needed a crowd. She needed 40 rich, bored neighbors to watch her play the tragic, long-suffering victim of a heartless child. There would be no screaming today, no tear-stained arguments on the front lawn. You don't negotiate with poison. You just step away from it. I looked down at my shirt. I reached down my calloused fingers, brushing the fabric, and smoothed out a single, invisible wrinkle. A sharp, mechanical movement. Then, I walked. Long, heavy, measured strides cutting straight through the crowd. The guests parted like water. Nobody made eye contact. The air suddenly smelled like roasting meat and a sickeningly sweet, expensive perfume that made my throat itch. My back was perfectly straight, a stark contrast to the slouched, wine-drunk bodies shrinking away. I walked right past Jackie. I didn't stop. I just tilted my chin, catching her wide eyes for a split second. "Then live like you don't have this daughter," I said. My voice was completely flat. Quiet. It didn't shake, not even a fraction. I didn't wait for her jaw to drop or for her tears to start falling. I reached the mahogany entryway table, hooked my index finger through the metal ring of my Porsche keys, and pushed the heavy front door open. The thick wood slammed shut behind me instantly, cutting off the frantic murmurs starting up inside. The desert heat hit me like a dry towel. I crossed the driveway, the gravel crunching loud and harsh under my boots. I pulled the heavy car door open and dropped into the leather driver's seat. I pulled the door shut. Total silence again. Just the faint, steady hum of the air conditioning kicking to life. I stared out the windshield at the immaculate manicured lawn I had paid thousands to maintain. Then a sharp, violent buzz against my thigh. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. The screen lit up the dim interior of the car with a harsh, blue glow. A text message from Jackie. "Sophie, bring my car back here this instant, or I'm calling the cops to report it stolen." I stared at the glowing letters. My car. She actually typed those words. I didn't reply. I dropped the phone onto the passenger seat like it was burning my hand. My palms gripped the leather-wrapped steering wheel. I squeezed, harder and harder until the skin over my knuckles pulled tight and turned completely sickly white. The light turned green. I slammed my heavy boot onto the gas pedal. The Porsche tore down the carefree highway, the engine roaring, leaving the manicured, overpriced lawns of Scottsdale in the dust. I tossed my phone onto the passenger seat. It vibrated violently against the leather. Flashing, buzzing, I ignored it. The air conditioning blasted freezing air against my face, drying the cold sweat on my forehead. The heavy low rumble of the tires chewing up the hot asphalt vibrated through the steering column, traveling straight up my arms. I glanced up at the rearview mirror. My eyes were bloodshot, the veins standing out sharp and angry against the white. These were the same eyes that hadn't even blinked when the dirt road blew wide open under our supply trucks 3 years ago. I kept my breathing steady back then. Yet here I was, my chest tight, my eyes burning, just because of a cheap threat from my own mother. I bought this car 2 years ago, paid in cold hard cash, handed over a cashier's check and drove it off the lot. It was the only thing I bought for myself after 14 straight months of living out of a canvas duffel bag across the world. 14 months of hauling heavy gear in 110-degree heat, sleeping in a dirt hole, and choking down stale, rock-hard food out of foil packets. I saved every single dime. But the job called me away again. I tossed Jackie the spare key in the kitchen before I left. "Take it to the grocery store sometimes," I had told her, zipping up my jacket. "Keep the engine running smooth while I'm gone." That was my fatal error. I gave her an inch of convenience, and she turned it into full ownership. A memory flashed through my mind, bitter and clear. I had come back for a quick weekend visit a few months later. I was standing on the second-floor balcony, quiet, looking down at the backyard pool. Jackie was lounging on a patio chair, wearing a designer swimsuit, holding a watered-down margarita. 3 of her neighborhood friends were sitting around her, staring at the driveway. I heard her voice drifting up over the splashing water, loud and proud. "I've always loved German engineering," she bragged, taking a sip of her drink. "The financing is a bit steep every month, but honestly, it's completely worth it." Financing. She hadn't paid a single dime. I stood on that balcony, hidden in the shadows, listening to her wear my sweat and blood like a cheap knockoff handbag. I didn't walk down there. I didn't correct her. I wanted a normal family so badly that I let myself become a ghost in my own house. I funded her entire fake reality just to buy a little piece. I eased my foot onto the brakes and pulled into a desolate, sun-baked dirt parking lot at a highway rest stop. I threw the gear shift into park. The engine idled with a low, steady growl. I leaned my head back against the stiff headrest and stared at the cracked ceiling of the car. Giving in didn't buy me her love. It just fed an endless, greedy hole. The realization tasted like old, dirty pennies in my mouth. She didn't want a daughter. She just wanted a bank account she could bully. If you've ever had a family member treat your hard-earned money like it was their rightful property, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Drop the word "done" in the comments if you know exactly how exhausting it is to finally cut them off. I reached over to the passenger seat, ready to block her number permanently. I didn't care about the noise anymore. But before my fingers even grazed the glass screen, the phone lit up bright white. The angry buzzing shifted into a sharp, continuous ring. It wasn't a text message this time. It was a phone call. I froze. I stared down at the caller ID flashing in the dim interior of the car. Scottsdale Police Department. The phone buzzed in my hand, vibrating violently against my palm. The harsh blue light of the screen illuminated the dark interior of the car. Scottsdale Police Department. I didn't hesitate. I pressed the green button and lifted the cold glass to my ear. "This is Sophie Martin." Ms. Martin, this is Officer David Bennett. A flat mechanical voice came through the speaker. We just received a priority call from a Jackie Martin regarding a stolen Porsche 911. Are you currently in possession of the vehicle? His tone was completely dry, routine. To him, I was probably just another spoiled rich kid from the suburbs who took mommy's keys after a bad argument. My jaw locked. A felony grand theft charge. It wouldn't just put me in a concrete holding cell. It would strip away my hard-earned pension, my professional licenses, and entirely gut the career I had spent 14 years building. Every drop of sweat, every broken bone, every brutal shift wiped out by a single phone call. My mother knew exactly what the stakes were. She was willing to burn my entire life to the ground just because I embarrassed her at a brunch. I didn't cry. I didn't launch into a hysterical explanation about my toxic family. I'm sitting in the driver's seat right now, Officer Bennett. I said, my voice dead calm. And I have the title. I hung up without waiting for his reply. I grabbed my bag, pushed the heavy car door open, and stepped out into the suffocating Arizona heat. I walked straight into a cheap, run-down diner attached to the highway rest stop. The air inside was thick. It smelled like burnt coffee and old fryer grease. A flickering neon sign buzzed loudly above the counter. The sticky linoleum floor pulled at the bottom of my boots with every heavy step I took. I slid into a cracked red vinyl booth in the darkest corner of the room. I reached into my bag and pulled out my heavy rubber-edged laptop. I flipped it open. The screen flared to life, casting a pale glare across the scratched plastic table. My fingers hit the keys fast, hard, and precise. I didn't blink. I logged into my secured cloud drive and pulled up the PDF files. I picked up my phone and called the precinct back. Bennett answered on the second ring. Check your inbox, Officer Bennett. I said, staring blindly at a cheap plastic cup of ice water a tired waitress had just slammed down on my table. I sent the original bill of sale, the insurance policy, the bank statements showing the exact cash wire transfer. There is no cosigner. My name is the only one on that paper. Silence on the line. 10 agonizing seconds ticked by. I could hear his steady, heavy breathing through the speaker. I heard the faint, rapid clicking of his computer mouse. Then, the shift happened. The underlying suspicion in his voice completely vanished. It was instantly replaced by a rigid, professional respect. I'm looking at the documents right now, Ms. Martin, Bennett said, clearing his throat. The paperwork is absolute. I apologize for the inconvenience. We'll be closing the stolen vehicle report immediately. Understood. I ended the call and tossed the phone onto the table. 5 minutes. That was all it took to completely dismantle the legal trap my mother tried to snap shut around my neck. I reached forward and pushed the laptop shut. The screen went black, plunging the booth back into shadows. I was perfectly safe from the law. I had won the battle. But sitting in that greasy, empty diner, my chest caved in. It felt completely hollow. A cold, nauseating ache settled deep in the pit of my stomach. She actually did it. The woman who birthed me tried to lock me in a cage over a piece of metal. I stared down at the condensation dripping down the sides of the cheap water cup. My stiff shoulders finally dropped. The adrenaline rapidly drained out of my veins, leaving behind a crushing, heavy exhaustion. I raised both hands, ready to bury my face in my palms and just breathe. Then the glaring afternoon sun streaming through the dusty window was suddenly blocked. A massive shadow fell over my table. The harsh, grinding screech of a wooden chair being pulled out across the sticky floor ripped through the silence. The shadow didn't move. I slowly lifted my head, my hands dropping flat onto the sticky table. It was Logan Cash. He didn't ask for permission. He grabbed the top of the wooden chair across from me and pulled it out. The rusted metal legs shrieked against the dirty linoleum floor. He dropped his heavy frame into the seat, his thick boots planting firmly under the table. He had followed my taillights all the way from the highway. He didn't offer a pitying look. He didn't ask if I was okay. He just raised 2 thick fingers at the tired waitress, wiping down the counter. A minute later, she walked over and slammed 2 thick porcelain mugs of black drip coffee onto our table. The dark liquid sloshed over the rims, pooling on the scratched plastic. Logan slid 1 mug toward me. I wrapped my hands around the scalding ceramic. The heat burned my palms, but it was a grounding, real kind of pain. I took a sip. It was bitter burnt and exactly what I needed. Logan leaned back against the red vinyl booth. The harsh neon light overhead caught the thick, jagged scar stretching across his neck. "She always act like that?" he asked. His voice was a low, gravelly rumble. I stared down at the dark reflection in my coffee. I gave a single slow nod. That was it. That was the entire conversation. Between us, no explanations were necessary. Logan was the man who knew my exact blood type by heart. He was the man who had dragged me out of a burning heap of crushed metal 2 years ago, choking on thick black smoke just to keep me breathing. He had seen me take physical hits that would break a normal person in half, and he had never seen me shed a tear. He knew exactly what it meant that I was sitting here in this diner completely hollowed out. He understood that the quiet betrayal of a mother cut infinitely deeper than a broken bone. I looked at his calloused hands resting on the table. The dirt and grease permanently ground into his knuckles. A sickening wave of guilt washed over me. For years, I had taken the money I bled for the paycheck people like Logan suffered in the mud to earn and handed it over to a woman who treated my life like an endless faucet. I funded her lavish lifestyle, her expensive wine, her manicured country club facade. Jackie had never once asked if my shoulder ached when the winter weather hit. She never asked why I woke up in cold sweats. She only cared if the car parked in her driveway looked expensive enough to make her friends jealous. I had been paying a massive premium just to be treated like garbage. I took another slow drink of the bitter coffee. The tight knot between my shoulder blades finally started to loosen. The quiet, heavy presence of a real friend was working like a slow drip of oxygen in a suffocating room. I let out a long, ragged exhale. Then the phone sitting next to my mug buzzed. The harsh vibration rattled the cheap table. I glanced down. The screen lit up with a text message from Jackie. "I only scolded you because I care about your future. Stop acting like a dramatic child and come home." Before I could even process the sheer audacity of that gaslighting text, a second notification popped up right underneath it. A sharp, high-pitched ding cut through the ambient noise of the diner. It was an alert from my central banking app. Transaction approved $1,200. Merchant Camelback Mountain Resort and Spa. I stared at the numbers glowing on the glass screen. The cold, hard reality hit me dead in the chest. Minutes after calling the cops to try and lock me in a concrete cell, she went to get a luxury massage. On my dime. My shoulders locked, the exhaustion completely vanished. My eyes narrowed into a cold, dead stare. I stared at the glowing numbers on the screen. Transaction approved $1,200. Merchant Camelback Mountain Resort and Spa. My chest didn't hurt anymore. The tight, suffocating knot of betrayal completely vanished, replaced by something entirely different. Disgust. Pure, freezing disgust. I wasn't looking at a mother who needed patience or understanding. I was looking at a massive financial liability. A parasite that had attached itself to my bank account, draining my sweat and blood to fund her country club illusion. While I was sitting in a filthy highway diner, smelling like burnt grease, dodging a felony grand theft charge she initiated, she was out buying a luxury hot stone massage. With my money. I closed the text thread. I opened my central banking app. The harsh white light reflected deep in my eyes. I typed in my passcode. My thumb swiped down the menu to the Authorized Users tab. 3 separate credit cards loaded on the screen, all platinum. All bearing the name Jackie Martin. I remembered when I gave her the first one. Just for emergencies, she had promised. Emergencies quickly turned into designer shoes, imported wine, and expensive resort days. I had let it happen, not anymore. I didn't hesitate. I didn't feel a single ounce of guilt. My finger tapped the first line. Account options. Lock card. Deactivate permanently. A bright green checkmark popped up. Done. I tapped the second card. Deactivate. Another green checkmark. I tapped the third. Deactivate. Green checkmark. 3 seconds. 10 years of working double shifts, breaking my back, and living out of a canvas bag to fund her vanity ended in 3 agonizingly simple seconds. The financial bloodline was officially severed. The pipeline was dry. If you have ever had to make the brutal decision to cut off a toxic family member who was bleeding you dry, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel right now. Drop the word "cut" down in the comments if you know exactly how liberating that green checkmark feels. Less than 3 minutes later, my phone vibrated. It wasn't a short buzz. It was an aggressive, continuous rattle against the cheap plastic table. Jackie must have been standing at the marble front desk of the Camelback Spa wearing a plush white robe trying to swipe my card for her treatments. The machine must have flashed bright red in front of the receptionist. Declined. The screen lit up. Mom. I didn't decline the call. I didn't block the number yet. I wanted her to hear the endless hollow ringing on her end. I wanted her to stand there in that expensive lobby and feel the exact moment her free ride crashed into a solid brick wall. I reached out, pulled down the quick menu on my screen, and tapped the little crescent moon icon. Do not disturb. The vibration stopped dead. The screen went completely black. I flipped the heavy phone face down onto the sticky table. Across from me, Logan took a slow sip of his black coffee. He didn't say a word, but the corner of his mouth twitched up into a faint, knowing smirk. I leaned back against the cracked vinyl booth. My mind was already moving forward. I wasn't finished. Locking those credit cards and taking back the Porsche was just pocket change. Jackie didn't just want my spending money. She felt entitled to everything I had ever built. The deed to the lakefront house, the mutual funds, and the most vital piece of paper of all, the massive life insurance policy. She actually believed she owned my ghost. If I dropped dead tomorrow, she fully expected to cash that check and throw a catered party. I picked my phone back up. I bypassed the missed calls and opened a secured text thread to Chris Blake, my legal affairs attorney. I didn't bother with small talk. My thumbs hit the glass keyboard, punching out a very clear set of instructions. Chris, I need to overhaul my entire estate plan, every single document. I'll be at your office tomorrow. 9 a.m. sharp. I hit send. Monday morning, 9 a.m. sharp. The legal affairs office was freezing. It smelled like cheap machine-brewed coffee and fresh printer ink. The air was sterile, completely devoid of the grease and noise of the highway diner from yesterday. Here, things were clean. Final. Dictated by black ink on thick, watermarked paper. Chris Blake, my legal attorney, slid a heavy manila folder across the cold steel desk. The label on the tab read, Estate Plan, Sophie Martin. He didn't offer a polite smile. He didn't ask how my weekend went. He took one look at my rigid posture and the dark, exhausted circles under my eyes. Are you absolutely certain about this? Chris asked, his voice low. I sat perfectly straight in the hard plastic chair. Both of my hands rested flat on my knees. I didn't break eye contact. Transfer the deed of the lakefront house. I said, my voice completely stripped of emotion. Set it up as a donation trust for a trauma recovery center. Liquidate the mutual funds entirely. Roll every dime into a scholarship fund for Gold Star families. Chris didn't argue. He just picked up his heavy metal pen. The sharp, abrasive scratch of the metal tip tearing across the rough paper echoed loudly in the quiet room. He was taking notes on the complete financial execution of my mother's future. And the federal life insurance policy, Chris said. He stopped writing. He flipped the heavy stack of documents to the very last page. I stared at the thick black text at the top of the form. This was the heart of it. The ultimate payout. The safety net designed to catch my family if I was ever brought home in a wooden box. The current primary beneficiary is your mother. Chris continued tapping the end of his pen against the desk. Changing this alters everything. It cuts her out of the blood money completely. I didn't blink. I reached across the steel desk and took the cold metal pen directly from his hand. I looked down at the paper. Jackie Martin. The name was printed in bold, taking up the most important line on the document. My chest tightened for a fraction of a second. A sharp, ugly twinge of guilt tried to claw its way up my throat. This was the woman who raised me. The woman who taught me how to tie my shoes. But it was also the woman who stood in front of 40 people and wished I wasn't her child, then tried to lock me in a concrete cell to steal a car. The guilt died instantly. My blood money isn't going to buy a country club membership for someone who hates me, I said flatly. I pressed the tip of the pen down hard. I dragged a thick black line straight through the name, Jackie Martin. I didn't just cross it out, I buried it under heavy ink. Then I moved my hand to the bottom corner of the page. I signed my own name. Quick, sharp, final. I dropped the pen onto the desk. It landed with a dull metallic clink. The crushing weight that had been sitting on my chest for 10 years completely vanished. My lungs expanded. For the first time since I could remember, the air felt incredibly light. I wasn't a bank account anymore. I wasn't a retirement plan. I was finally entirely my own. Chris quietly gathered the papers, tapping the edges against the steel desk to line them up perfectly and slid them back into the manila folder. I turned my head and looked at the plain white clock ticking on the office wall. 11:30 a.m. My lips pressed into a thin, hard line. Over in Scottsdale, the Arizona sun was peaking. It was exactly 11:30 a.m. Right about now, the wealthy women at the country club were sitting down for their expensive catered lunches. The financial plug was pulled, and the consequences were playing out in real time. Across town, I was sitting quietly at my kitchen table, sipping black coffee out of a thick ceramic mug. The house was completely silent. My phone sat face down on the cool granite counter. But out on the VIP dining patio of the Scottsdale Country Club, the afternoon sun glared down on the manicured lawns, and things were rapidly falling apart. Jackie sat at a table with 3 of her wealthiest neighbors. She was trying desperately to do damage control. Her makeup was caked on thicker than usual, her foundation starting to crease around her mouth from the dry heat. She laughed a little too loudly at a bad joke, her knuckles turning white as she gripped a sweating glass of chilled Chardonnay. The waiter, a young kid in a crisp white shirt, approached the table and set the leather checkbook down. Jackie waved her hand dismissively. She reached into her designer purse and pulled out the heavy metal platinum card. My card. She dropped it onto the tray with a confident, arrogant clatter. "Lunch is on me, ladies," she said, flashing a bright, tight smile. The waiter slid it into the handheld reader. Beep! A sharp, high-pitched noise cut through the polite clinking of silverware on fine china. The waiter frowned at the small digital screen. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he mumbled, clearing his throat. "It says declined." The conversation at the table stopped dead. 3 pairs of manicured hands slowly lowered their wine glasses. A thick, ugly red flush crept up Jackie's neck. She snatched the metal card back, her fingers shaking. "It's a fraud alert," she stammered, digging frantically back into her purse. "My bank is just overly cautious. Here, use this one." She handed him the gold card. He ran it. Beep. Declined. The silence at the table shifted. The air turned heavy, thick with quiet, brutal judgment. The country club crowd didn't tolerate broke pretenders. A woman in a silk blouse leaned back in her chair, looking at Jackie like she was a stain on the tablecloth. "You know Jackie," the woman said, her voice dropping into a low, mocking drawl. "My husband played golf with Officer Bennett this morning." Jackie froze. The heavy layer of foundation couldn't hide the sudden sickly pallor of her face. "He mentioned that little police visit to your house." The woman continued swirling the wine in her glass. "He said the Porsche wasn't stolen at all. He said it was registered entirely to your daughter. Funny how your credit cards seem to be having the exact same issue today." The mask completely shattered. Jackie's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The illusion she had spent years building, the wealthy, successful investor, was torn to shreds in front of the exact people she worshipped. She wasn't one of them. She was just a parasite who had finally been cut off. Pure panic set in. She grabbed her heavy leather purse and stood up so fast, her knees slammed into the table. The wooden chair screeched violently across the stone patio. Her elbow clipped a water glass, sending it crashing onto the ground. She didn't apologize. She pushed past the waiter and half ran through the dining room. Hushed whispers followed her out. She burst through the heavy glass doors and stumbled out into the blistering Arizona heat. Sweat pooled at the back of her neck. She marched to the curb and aggressively waved down a passing taxi, giving the driver my address. She was frantic and furious. She thought she could just barge through my front door, scream in my face, and use the heavy weight of her motherhood to force me to sign everything back over to her. She didn't realize the locks had already been changed, and I was waiting inside with all the receipts. The harsh screech of taxi tires grinding against the gravel driveway ripped through the quiet house. I was standing in the living room. The air inside was cool, clean, and perfectly still. 5 seconds later, the heavy wooden front door was shoved open violently. It slammed into the drywall with a loud, ugly bang, leaving a dent in the plaster. Jackie stormed in. The blistering desert heat rushed in behind her. She looked terrible. The expensive foundation she wore to the country club was melting down her face, caking into the deep lines around her mouth. Her hair was damp with a sour, nervous sweat. She was panting, her chest heaving, as she pointed a shaking finger directly at my face. "What the hell did you do to my cards?" she shrieked. Her voice was shrill, cracking at the edges. "You humiliated me in front of my friends. You signed the title of that car over to me right now, Sophie. Right now." I didn't flinch. I didn't step back. I stood completely flat-footed on the hardwood floor, my arms resting loose at my sides. I was a brick wall. I let her scream. I let her curse, wave her arms, and use every toxic, demanding word she had practiced in the taxi ride over here. She was trying to force a reaction. She wanted a fight. I gave her absolutely nothing. I just watched her. I watched her gasp for breath, her expensive facade peeling away to reveal exactly what she was: a panicked, greedy dependent who realized the ATM was broken. When she finally ran out of air and started coughing, I moved. I walked slowly to the heavy glass coffee table in the center of the room. I picked up a thick manila folder. I didn't hand it to her. I dropped it flat onto the glass. Thwack! The dry, heavy sound echoed in the living room. "Open it," I said. My voice was low, cold. Jackie hesitated, wiping a smear of makeup from her cheek. Her hands were trembling as she flipped the folder open. She tore through the thick pages. The original bill of sale for the Porsche, the property deed to the lakefront house, the freshly stamped federal life insurance forms. Every single page had a bright red notary seal. Every single page had only one name printed on it: mine. "It's all mine," I said, my tone completely flat. "You never contributed a single dime." Jackie stumbled backward. The papers slipped from her hands, scattering across the glass table. Her eyes went wide, darting wildly around the room. The reality of the paperwork was suffocating her. But the narcissism was too deeply rooted. She immediately played the victim. "But you let me think it was mine," she stammered, her voice dropping into a pathetic, watery whine. "You're cruel, Sophie. Are you really going to cut your own mother off over some property?" If you have ever stared into the face of a toxic parent playing the victim after they tried to destroy you, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Drop the word "enough" in the comments if you know exactly how good it feels to finally crush their manipulation. I took one slow step forward. The space between us shrank. My eyes locked onto hers, pinning her in place. "This stopped being about property the second you stood on a patio in front of strangers and wished you had never given birth to me," I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The words hit her like a physical blow to the chest. "You called me a cold, emotionless killing machine." I whispered, the silence of the room amplifying every sharp syllable. "So don't ever expect a single thing from this machine again." A dead, heavy silence crashed down on the living room. Jackie's mouth opened, but her vocal cords completely failed her. The fake, arrogant exterior completely shattered. Jackie collapsed onto the leather sofa like a deflated balloon. She buried her face in her hands. Her thin shoulders shook violently. It wasn't the loud, dramatic wailing she usually used to get her way. It was a raw, suffocating sob. The sound of a woman realizing she had absolutely nothing left to barter with. The late afternoon sun cast long, dim shadows across the living room. The hardwood floor beneath my boots felt cold. The silence of the house pressed in, amplifying the harsh, ragged sound of her crying. "I'm sorry," she gasped out, her voice muffled behind her smeared hands. "Sophie, I'm so sorry." I didn't take a step forward. I didn't reach out to rub her back or offer a tissue. I stood exactly where I was, my arms crossed tight over my chest. I stared down at the top of her messy hair, studying her like a stranger. "Are you sorry you got caught?" I asked, my voice completely flat. "Or are you actually sorry for what you did? Which one is it?" Jackie flinched. The question was a sharp knife digging straight into the ugly truth. She slowly lowered her hands. Her eyes were bloodshot, the heavy makeup running in dark streaks down her face. "I was jealous of you," she choked out. The words hung in the cold air. She squeezed her eyes shut, unable to look at me. "I was terrified of that uniform you wear. You're so strong. Everyone respects you. You built a whole life from nothing." She let out a wet, bitter laugh. "And what am I, just a useless, unemployed woman who peaked 30 years ago?" I thought. If those country club people believed I invested the money for all those things, maybe I wouldn't be so invisible. It was the most honest thing she had ever said to me in 34 years. She didn't hate me because I was a bad daughter. She hated me because my independence was a constant glaring spotlight on her own massive failures. She tried to tear me down in public because stealing my achievements was the only way she knew how to stand tall. A cold, heavy mixture of pity and absolute disgust washed over me. "I understand," I said quietly. Jackie looked up, a desperate glimmer of hope flashing in her swollen eyes. "But I am not backing down." I continued, crushing that hope instantly. Inheritance doesn't buy character. You want to be respected, go out and earn your own value. The desperate glimmer died. She realized the bank vault was permanently sealed. There would be no second chances, no manipulation tactics left to play. She pressed her hands against her knees and pushed herself up from the leather sofa with a heavy, pained groan. She looked old, defeated. She slowly turned toward the heavy wooden door, her shoulders slumped. "Will you ever change the will back?" she whispered, staring at the floor. "Yes," I said. "When trust is rebuilt. From absolute zero." She didn't argue. She didn't ask for the Porsche keys back. She didn't ask for a credit card for a taxi ride home. She just nodded once and shuffled out into the fading desert heat, carrying nothing but the harsh, naked truth. I watched her walk down the driveway. I stepped forward. I grabbed the heavy edge of the front door and pushed it shut. I reached up to the deadbolt. I turned the metal lock. Click! 1 year later, Mother's Day. I parked the Porsche in the cracked asphalt lot of a working-class apartment complex on the outskirts of Phoenix. No valet, no manicured lawns, just the hum of rattling window, AC units, and the smell of hot-baked concrete. I killed the engine. I was still wearing my heavy work boots and standard-issue uniform, having just finished a grueling 12-hour shift. I grabbed a brown paper bag of fresh fruit from the passenger seat and walked up the rusted metal stairs to the second floor. I knocked twice on the cheap hollow core door. The deadbolt clicked. The door swung open. Jackie stood there. She wasn't wearing a silk blouse. She wasn't wearing a heavy layer of expensive foundation to hide her age. She was wearing a faded denim shirt and a thick canvas apron dusted with white flour. The deep wrinkles around her eyes were fully visible, and for the first time, they looked entirely natural. Her knuckles were slightly swollen, the skin rough and peeling from industrial dish soap. She had spent the last 10 months working as a prep cook at a local bakery downtown, 40 hours a week, on her feet. "Come on in," she said, stepping back. Her voice was quiet, steady, no theatrical pitch. The apartment was tiny, cramped, but the worn linoleum floors were spotless and the air smelled intensely of oven-roasted chicken and fresh bread. We sat down at a small formica table in the kitchen. There were no crystal glasses or thick tomahawk steaks, just simple roasted chicken with blistered skin, a basic green salad, and 2 glasses of tap water with ice. Every single bite of food on that table was bought with her own clean paycheck. We ate in silence. It wasn't the heavy, suffocating silence of a standoff. It was just a comfortable, tired quiet. No one had to pretend. No one had to prove their worth to a room full of wealthy strangers. When the plates were empty, Jackie wiped her hands on her apron. She reached over to the counter and handed me a small paper package. "I know you don't need anything," she said, looking down at her hands, "but I wanted to give you this." I tore the brown paper open. It was a picture frame. Cheap pine wood, the kind you buy at a corner drugstore for $5. Inside was a photograph of the two of us from the day I took my oath. I was standing straight, wearing my heavy brass pins. She was standing next to me. For years, it always hurt that she never seemed proud of that day, only proud of the paycheck that followed it. I turned the frame over. On the cheap cardboard backing, she'd written a note in neat blue ink. Thank you for cutting me off so I could finally learn how to be proud of my own two hands. I stared at the ink. The thick, cold iron wall I'd built around my chest over the last 10 years suddenly cracked. The corners of my eyes burned. I didn't say a single word. I stood up, walked around the small Formica table, and wrapped my arms around her shoulders. She hugged me back, tightly. Her hands felt rough against my back. It was the first real hug I'd received from my mother in my entire adult life. An hour later, I was standing out on the concrete walkway. Jackie leaned against the doorframe, looking down at the black Porsche gleaming in the afternoon sun. "Car still looks beautiful, Sophie." She said, a soft, genuine smile on her face. I looked back at her. "You want to take it for a spin?" Jackie shook her head. She wiped a smudge of flour off her cheek. "No, I think I'm going to wait until I can buy myself an old used pickup truck. Cash." I let out a short, real laugh. I walked down the metal stairs, slid into the driver's seat, and fired up the engine. I looked through the windshield at the endless, clear blue Arizona sky. I had lost the heir to a massive estate, but sitting there listening to the engine hum, I knew I had finally saved a soul. Thank you so much for listening to my story, all the way to the end. Your support, your comments, and your shared experiences mean the absolute world to me. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel and take care of yourselves out there. Goodbye for now.